Greetings, fellow citizens of Scottsdale. I've known all my perpetual motion life never to question the wise and wondrous workings of the good Lord. However, I do wish that he or someone could explain how I arrived tonight on the northernmost point of my original homestead. But so be it. I'm here and totally fascinated to see what has developed in the town. My beloved wife Helen, my brother George, our rambunctious mule Maud, and I left some 11 years ago. This impressive gathering reminds me of so many get-togethers we enjoyed at our ranch. A mere handful of families braved innumerable hardships to settle with us. Oh yes, we worked hard, but we also enjoyed socializing at Sunday and at the picnics when we happily celebrated Thanksgiving, Christmas, weddings, baptisms, and life. I must confess that brevity has never been my soulmate. I could tell stories all night, just like I used to share Civil War experiences with the children at the schoolhouse we constructed one Sunday in 1896 on my property. These taradiddle tales would be about this magnificent land, its bounty, but most importantly about the people who came here and built with commitment, dedication, and love, a community. Our challenges were monumental, but our spirit steadfast. Irrigating the rich soil was a major hurdle. Our crops and livestock required water, and this became our greatest challenge. But tonight, my immediate quandary is understanding the magic of an apparatus that, as confusing as it sounds, is now prepared to project some of the Scottsdale story. I do hope that someone will take me aside later and tell me, what is a video machine?
Scottsdale. It's the youngest of cities and the oldest of places. Its people arrived just yesterday, or thousands of yesterdays ago. It's a place of tradition, history, culture, and cutting-edge ideas. Most of all, Scottsdale is a place where people have created a very special sense of place. The people of Scottsdale have always joined together to observe important events and milestones. Petroglyphs created by the archaic and Hohokam people thousands of years ago are evidence of the earliest ceremonies in Scottsdale. The Winfield Scots and their fellow settlers celebrated holidays and events together in the late 1800s. Carrying on this tradition, residents and visitors alike are using the 50th anniversary of the incorporation of Scottsdale to honor the past, rejoice in the present, and imagine the future. To honor Scottsdale's past is to honor its people, their spirit, their vision, their hard work, and their challenges. The roll call of Scottsdale's community builders is endless, containing many names and faces you know, as well as countless unsung heroes and heroines. Perhaps their very best efforts can be briefly chronicled by examining some of the key challenges they faced and the innovations they engineered to meet those challenges. Water has been the #1 challenge facing Scottsdale community builders over the millennia. Sustaining life in the semi-arid Sonoran Desert requires year-round reliable access to water, a precious commodity in the Salt River Valley. Centuries ago, the Hohokam people, believed to have been the first permanent settlers in the place now known as Scottsdale, devised a way to get water to their crops. Beginning in approximately 800 AD, they built brush dams to divert water from the Salt River and then dug canals using stone hose to direct the water onto their farmland. This enabled them to grow corn, squash, and other crops and to create a quality of life that included sports and art. The Hohokam mysteriously disappeared around 1450 AD. Some historians believe that massive floods wiped out their dam and canal system, and subsequent drought forced them to move elsewhere. Those indigenous people who remained in the Scottsdale area continued to farm and are believed to be the ancestors of the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community. Following the Civil War, interest in the West, particularly Arizona, heightened. In 1865, the U.S. Army established Camp McDowell on the eastern slopes of the McDowell Mountains to protect settlers in central Arizona. Enterprising explorers thought the Salt River Valley would be a great place to grow crops to supply the Army fort, if only they could get water from the Salt River to irrigate the land nearby. Civil War veteran Jack Swilling discovered the ruins of the Hohokam canals near the Salt River and set up a company to redig them for irrigation. Like the mythical bird, the small settlement of Phoenix grew out of the Hohokam ashes. Thanks to the availability of water, the new town of Phoenix not only supplied Camp McDowell, but also established the Salt River Valley as an up-and-coming agricultural and commerce center in the newly established Arizona Territory. Canals became big business. Dwight Hurd and William J. Murphy were the driving forces behind construction of the Arizona Canal from 1883 to 1885. An engineering marvel in its time, the canal traveled east-west and cutting through vast amounts of remote desert east of Phoenix. Investors, land speculators, farmers, and those who needed to come to Arizona for health reasons began to buy up land along the route of the new canal. One of those foresighted investors was Army Chaplain Winfield Scott, who in 1888 homesteaded land at what is now the northeast corner of Indian School and Scottsdale Road. Right away, he and his brother George were successful growing citrus trees, thanks in large part to the Arizona Canal, which cut through the northwest corner of Scott's property. Water continued to be the major challenge at the turn of the 20th century to the new settlement called Scottsdale and its neighboring Salt River Valley towns. Although the growing population needed lots of water to support their farms, businesses, and lifestyle, sometimes there was too much of it. Seasonal floods ripped through simply built dams and destroyed crops. In 1903, local farmers put up their own land as collateral and worked through the new Salt River Valley Water Users Association to build the Granite Reef and Roosevelt dams. These new dams, along with improvements made to the existing canal and lateral system, were a big step forward in assuring year-round, reliable access to water. Building and maintaining canals brought many people to Scottsdale. Among those arriving in the early 1900s were the Cavaliers, who came to dredge the Arizona Canal, then stayed in Scottsdale to run a blacksmith and ornamental iron shop. The Corral family came from Mexico to work for E.O. Brown in 1919, with Tomas becoming a zanjero, or water overseer for Brown's fields. In 1922, the Water Users Association sponsored Yaqui Indians from Mexico to come to the valley to help with the canal project. The Yaquis named their water users work camp Penjamo. One of the most important water sources to Scottsdale today began as an idea in the 1920s and finally began supplying water in 1985. It is the Central Arizona Project. Water planners knew that local ground and surface water resources would not be enough to supply the growing population, so they sought water from the Colorado River over 300 miles from the valley. U.S. Senator Carl Hayden and Congressman John Rhodes championed the massive water project. Scottsdale was one of the CAP's first municipal customers when then-Governor Bruce Babbitt turned on the tap in 1985. Scottsdale residents had also relied on groundwater sources run by numerous privately owned water companies. In the 1930s and 1940s, Gabe Brooks and his water drilling rig nicknamed Punch and Judy were a familiar sight around Scottsdale. People in town bought their water from the private companies. Those living on farms and ranches north of the Scottsdale town site had to have their own wells. After incorporation, the town government put a major focus on consolidating water sources and began buying up the private water well companies. Although Scottsdale still gets some of its water from 34 city-owned wells today, its primary source is surface water supplied by SRP and the CAP.
That Arizona Canal you good people drive over every day in your modern automobiles is what made this beautiful spot livable back in the 1890s. But also, in order to attract more settlers to our farming community, we needed businesses. In those days, getting supplies to Phoenix or Tempe was an arduous trip by horse and wagon over dusty, unpaved roads. My good friend, J.L. Davis, opened our first general store and the post office in 1897. This gave to us our initial non-farm establishment. Mr. Davis would be astonished to see the thousands of businesses and the quintet of post offices. Unfortunately, he would be shocked to see the numberless and thriving liquor merchants. We and our temperance-minded neighbors did, I remind you, good folks, form the territory's first anti-saloon league.
Building and sustaining an economy has been another big challenge for residents and leaders of Scottsdale. With limited water and infrastructure, but with plenty of gumption, early settlers followed Chaplain Winfield Scott's lead and farmed the land. Just as the Hohokam people discovered over 1,000 years ago, with water and hard work, Scottsdale's soil and climate would produce good crops, from citrus to grapes to cotton. Between 1888 and the late 1950s, Scottsdale's economic engine was agriculture, food crops, cotton, dairy and beef cattle, and chickens.
I moved to Scottsdale in 1941. I was in the 5th grade. I can remember that it was, when we moved from 27th Street and Baseline to Scottsdale, and we had to move our dairy operation, the cows and everything, and that was the time when the river was running, and I've told this story a lot of times that people cannot believe that we actually drove our cattle right down through Mill Avenue, right through Tempe, over the Tempe Bridge, up over the mountains there by the sanitarium and on into Scottsdale. And that's the way we moved those cattle, and did it all started early in the morning and ended up late at night.
We came at 42, and I remember we bought a herd over on the west side of town, a Jersey herd, and brought them over to Scottsdale. And we didn't drive ours, we trucked them over. But Jerseys are a little smaller, and they're a little easier to handle in that regard. And we had to milk them in the corral for the first year because we didn't build the barn till late in 42. But we did have to put a place up for the chickens. And we started off with about 1,000, and 2 years later we had 2,000 laying hens.
Yeah. We was at the corner of Hayden and Indian School, and you was at the corner, and which you still are, at the corner of Indian School and Miller.
That's right.
Scottsdale's farms needed a support system. J.L. Davis became the first retailer in the new town in 1897 when he opened a general store and post office. Sarah Thomas and E.O. Brown took over the general store at the southwest corner of Brown and Main Streets and expanded its merchandise, supplying the basic needs of residents and creating a popular gathering place for decades. Between 1910 and 1940, Scottsdale's business district expanded to include a few cafes, mercantiles, a pool hall, a drugstore, a barber shop, and a blacksmith shop. But retail remained pretty much at the subsistence level.
It was a nice place to live in, it really was. And there was all the business, and in those early days was just on Brown Avenue, and just a small portion on Main Street. There wasn't anything in 1919 when I came on Scottsdale Road, no business, true business. It's a couple of service stations.
You used to have in the old pool hall, they used to post boys' grades in the pool hall years ago, and they would draw a line where the kids were a failure, that didn't make the grade, and those kids weren't allowed in the pool hall. Jerry, the fellow that ran the pool hall, wouldn't let you in. Remember that? And so you'd go back to your teacher, and she'd say, well, if you will write 4 or 5 pages on some subject, or if you read a book or do something else, why I'll let you off on it. She'd call, and you'd go back and get it done, and quick as you could. You go back down, and they'd cross your name off, and you were allowed back in the pool hall. And the pool hall wasn't a bad place in those days.
No, it wasn't.
Kept the grades up, and it was kind of the meeting place. If
Yeah,
they,
that's where we spent our noon hour.
That's right.
Basically, was in the pool hall.
yeah, if you went to a dance at night and the girls didn't favor to you to want to dance with you, you didn't get mad. You just went back to the pool hall.
It was country. There were no paved roads. We didn't really want them because we had horses and you could ride, and the asphalt is very hard on horses. So we had probably 4 blocks of Scottsdale. There was the Basket House, which was the big thing, run by some people named Sykes Pettit. And then we had next to that was Tom Daly's saddle shop, cowboy, who later went on to furnish horses to the movies. And there was the Pink Pony and the Lula Bell. Not much else, not much else. J. Chew's Mexican import place has always been there, but there was not a great deal, at least in 1950 and 51, and they came pretty fast after that. And everybody knew everybody, and there were shadows across Scottsdale Road from the cottonwood trees, and very little population. McCormick Ranch was a great thing. You could go up Scottsdale Road and look east, and that was McCormick Ranch as far as the eye could see, which was quite a distance.
Retail began to take off after World War II, when more residents and tourists demanded more consumer goods, from fashions to food to furniture to art. Downtown Scottsdale was awakening as a very chic place to shop. The malls came in 1961, when a much smaller Fashion Square opened, followed by Los Arcos Mall in 1969. During the 1970s and 1980s, many specialty shopping areas opened, including the Borgata and El Pedregal. Then in the 1990s, an expanded Scottsdale Fashion Square became one of the largest and most successful shopping areas in the Southwest, generating a healthy amount of sales tax revenue for the city's economy. Scottsdale settlers also started 2 industries that are significant in our economy today: tourism and healthcare. In fact, the 2 industries were one and the same for several decades. Winfield Scott and his pioneer neighbors welcomed relatives and friends into their homes, often for health reasons. Doctors back east prescribed the warm, dry Arizona climate for patients with lung ailments and arthritis. With no hotels or hospitals to come to, these lungers, as they were often called, became house guests or paying boarders in local homes. In Scottsdale, the first health camp opened in the early 1900s, the Graves Guest Ranch on the northwest corner of Indian School and Scottsdale Road. In 1909, Ralph Murphy, son of canal builder and citrus promoter William Murphy, opened the Ingleside Inn, which was Scottsdale's first luxury resort. The inn, located near Indian School and 56th Street, attracted many well-heeled winter visitors, providing them a variety of outdoor adventures. Ingleside also provided jobs to local residents. In 1936, John Lincoln and Jack Stewart opened the Camelback Inn, but tourism was limited during the years of the Depression and World War II. Once the war was over, people were eager to travel, and Arizona became a popular destination. To meet the new demand, dozens of guest ranches opened in the desert north and west of Scottsdale in the late 1940s and throughout the 1950s.
There was Dorothy Patterson, who had the Ride and Rock Ranch, where more celebrities than you can shake a stick at used to stay. Every winter, you had Bo Rockefeller, you had all kinds of people of this caliber.
The Safari Hotel opened in 1955. Bobby Fale opened the Valley Ho in 1956. Both attracted celebrities and a new set of winter visitors. After modest growth in Scottsdale's tourism industry in the 1960s, the big boom in resort and hotel construction started in the 1970s and still continues, adding a resort corridor north along Scottsdale Road and luxury properties such as the Hyatt at Caney Ranch in 1986, the Scottsdale Princess in 1987, the Boulders in 1985, and the Four Seasons in 1999. Golf, as a tourist attraction, but nice for residents too, had been in Scottsdale since the early days of the Ingleside Inn, when foursomes initially played from oiled down dirt and later from grass-covered fairways. But growth in golf was slow until the 1970s, with only a few courses built, like Sundown Ranch, now Scottsdale Country Club, and the Continental Golf Course. From the mid-1970s on to the present, golf courses became part and parcel of Scottsdale's new planned communities and resorts, the TPC Scottsdale, Grayhawk, Troon, and Desert Mountain, to name a few. Today, 40 courses have a Scottsdale address, with more under construction. The Scottsdale Air Park has become home to many related golf businesses, from course design to club manufacturing. Golf has become a significant contributor to Scottsdale's economy. Healthcare began to move out of the convalescent center phase and into the major industry status in 1962, when the City Hospital of Scottsdale opened. After a somewhat shaky start and several changes in ownership, today it is an entire system known as Scottsdale Healthcare, with 2 hospital campuses and a whole host of outpatient facilities and services. In 1987, the famed Mayo Clinic opened its doors in Scottsdale, bringing international recognition of Scottsdale as a healthcare mecca. Electronics and high-tech entered Scottsdale's economic picture when Dan Noble was instrumental in bringing Motorola to Scottsdale in 1957. Motorola not only brought a space-age industry to town, it also brought hundreds of educated workers and their families to Scottsdale. They needed homes and schools. Farmers began selling their land to home builders like John Hall of Hallcraft Homes, and by the mid-1960s, Scottsdale was no longer considered a farming community. The only farms left were Arabian horse farms, which were thriving. One cannot talk about innovative approaches to building Scottsdale's economy without mentioning the development of the Scottsdale Air Park. This remote area, miles north of the farming community of Scottsdale, first attracted attention during World War II when it was used as a primary flight training base for the Army Air Force. Scottsdale residents carpooled across the dusty desert for war work there. Dorothy Cavalier Ketchum Roberts was a parachute rigger. Malcolm White was a flight instructor. After the war, the Arizona State College used the field for a vocational school. In 1953, the Seventh-day Adventists took it over for their Thunderbird Academy High School, which still operates there today. The Adventists didn't need all the land they had, so they brought in developer and visionary George Tewksbury to help them find a use for it, and that he did. Several hundred acres were donated to Scottsdale for the municipal airport the city so desperately wanted. With the help of other developers and visionaries like Bill Arthur, by 1976, the air park had attracted several companies, including the Research and Development Center for Armour Dial. Over the past 25 years, hundreds of other companies, large and small, have located in the air park, placing it among the top 3 employment centers in Maricopa County. Looking at the origins of the Scottsdale Chamber of Commerce provides us a transition between discussing the challenge of building an economy to the challenge of building a governing body for Scottsdale. Soldiers returning from World War II, some attracted to the area from their training experience at Thunderbird II Airfield, and visitors who decided to move here swelled Scottsdale's population in the late 1940s. But dusty, unpaved streets, the smell of sewage, no fire department, and the presence of gyp artists were fast becoming intolerable to the residents and growing number of businesses and winter visitors who were coming to this unincorporated area of Maricopa County. Somebody needed to take charge. Scottsdale merchants, artists, and businesses formed the Scottsdale Chamber of Commerce in 1947, electing artist Wes Segner as president. The chamber immediately helped get things organized, from raising money to sprinkle down those dusty streets, to having the first street maps printed, to promoting tourism, to encouraging honest business practices. In many respects, the chamber performed the functions of a municipality during its first years, creating much-needed infrastructure and community welfare programs. By 1949, Scottsdale residents and businesses began to talk about the need to incorporate as a town in order to get fire protection, street paving, street lighting, police protection, garbage pickup, and other basic services. They also wanted control over Scottsdale's well-established Western and arts identity and feared being absorbed by neighboring cities. The threat of annexation and disagreements over water rights and access heightened local interest in incorporation. The Scottsdale Chamber held public hearings at Scottsdale High School to help residents and businesses study the issue together. In January 1951, a committee chaired by Dr. Philip Schneider began circulating petitions for a vote on incorporation. Petitions with signatures of over 2/3 of Scottsdale's property owners were turned in on May 21st, and on June 25th, The Board of Supervisors declared Scottsdale an incorporated town without the need for election. The county appointed Mort Kimsey, Bill Miller, E.J. Scott, Jack Sweeney, and Malcolm White as the town council to serve until an election could be held the following May. White became the first mayor, which was ironic because he had publicly questioned the need to incorporate. The new town of Scottsdale had an area of less than a square mile and just over 2,000 residents. Its borders were roughly Miller Road to the east, Camelback Road and the Arizona Canal to the north, Orange Road, now Goldwater Boulevard, to the west, and Osborne Road to the south. With the town government in place, ready to take charge of all things municipal, the Scottsdale Chamber turned to economic development and tourism promotion. Throughout its 54 years, the Chamber has been a catalyst for many positives in the community, creating a worldwide convention and tourism image, attracting corporate headquarters and major employers to locate here, encouraging entrepreneurs to develop their ideas and products, helping the community focus on significant issues. The Chamber also was instrumental in starting community traditions, such as the Parada del Sol, which began as the Sunshine Festival in November of 1951.
I am amazed at the breadth and the depth of Scottsdale's economic development. So many of my original visions have been realized. In those early days, we were all like family. When someone needed something, we all pitched in to help. We used to have poundings for newcomers and newlyweds. We would bring them a pound of flour, sugar, potatoes, and so on. I am so pleased to see you continuing to meet the challenge of seeing a need and bonding together to resolve it.
Since incorporation in 1951, the town and later city government, in partnership with residents and civic organizations, has faced many challenges in building a community where we all want to live, work, raise our families, and welcome visitors. Collaboration and innovation have been Scottsdale's keys to success. One of the first innovations enacted by the town of Scottsdale was contracting for private fire protection service with a new local company calling itself the Rural Fire Company. It was founded by news reporter Lou Weitzman in 1948 and is one of Scottsdale's oldest corporate headquarters.
I came out here, I followed the fire department out here.
Yeah.
It was great. It was a wonderful life.
Didn't the city people kind of help you or some of the city people on alert when they had a fire?
Oh, yeah. Well, from the very beginning, on an informal basis, Mort Kimsey and a lot of others would turn up. In our glory days with Herb Drinkwater, he was one of our #1 volunteers,
Yeah.
tanker driver. He'd shut down his store and drive a tanker to a fire. Later we formalized it, and we still do. It's a system of city employees who respond by their radio dispatched, and they respond on structural fires with the regular men. They get the same training, and it's a great system. It's been copied all over the country.
Residents of Scottsdale have always enjoyed getting involved in shaping their community. In the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, hundreds of citizens participated in Scottsdale Town Enrichment Program, or STEP committees. Out of those committees came a whole range of solutions that we benefit from today.
Of that to the next era, which was the STEP committees, when we began to look at having different amenities, a sewer system, a park system, and we began to look far farther ahead. And we began to set our own destiny as to what we wanted to have in the community. And we set zoning for those kinds of things. And I think at that era also developed the Indian Bend Wash. And I think that those were characteristics of the community that kind of set things going. And of course, as has happened, why we got a tremendous amount of beautiful hotels up and down Scottsdale Road, and now going clear out the Princess and other hotels way out up north, and the golf courses came in, and I think we became a very fine city for management. I think a lot of the management people and professional people of Phoenix moved out to Scottsdale, and so I think the die was somewhat set.
As Paul mentioned, one of the best ideas coming out of the STEP committees was how to deal with the flooding problems of the Indian Bend Wash. Let's hear what a former resident of the Wash and later mayor of Scottsdale had to say about it.
You know, that used to be one of Scottsdale's biggest drawbacks, was that Indian Bend Wasteway.
Yep,
When they got that solved,
biggest
They brought-
assets.
they brought the green belt in and made that a grass-lined channel, and everything that's happened there has now become one of its biggest assets.
With all the citizen-driven good governing going on, one could say that Scottsdale began to suffer from its own success. People were moving here in droves, and visitors were coming by the thousands. Shortly after incorporation, Scottsdale began to annex bits and pieces of land east to the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community and south toward Stampede in order to accommodate its popularity and control its future. By the 1960s, after the town of Scottsdale had become a chartered city, it had major annexation decisions to make. By 1986, Scottsdale had grown to nearly 185 square miles by annexing land east to the Fountain Hills border and north to the Tonto Forest.
The mayor's office was in the Little Red Schoolhouse, and that's where my office was. I was in there one day, and anyway, Guy Stillman came in, and I'll never forget this. And he said, "Bill, I'd like to have Scottsdale annex the McCormick Ranch." Well, I nearly fell out of my chair because, you know, a person, you know, an entity coming and saying, "Well, we'd like to have you annex us." So I took it to the council. In fact, we was going to have a council meeting that night. And I mentioned it to the council. I said, "Now, Guy Stillman wants us to annex the McCormick Ranch." And everyone said, "Well, my gosh, that's too far out of town," you know. I remember we wanted to go ahead and develop the Scottsdale, you know, the airport, because the Seventh-day Adventists wanted us to come in there and
Put municipal airport in.
and put in the runway and all, and they would dedicate the land to us because the government let the Seventh-day Adventists have that.
Yeah.
But then they turned around and I think they dedicated 400 acres to us for the runway and all. And so we started out, and I can remember Phoenix. They wanted to cut us off, so they tried to come in and annex that portion. And I remember on a Sunday afternoon, Ken Williams and Ozzie Burton. Ozzie was the city attorney then.
Ken Williams was the city manager.
City manager, and they wanted to know if I knew Kemper Marley.
Yeah.
I said, "Well, yeah, I do." And so they said, "Well, we got to see if we can get his signature." So anyways, could you call him? This was on a Sunday.
Yeah.
So I called Kemper, and he said, "Well, I'd like to talk to you. I can meet you down at my office." Well, his office was at the stockyards. So we went down there, and Ozzie laid this petition out in front of him and told him what was going on. And we wanted to annex some of his land. And he says, "Well," he said, "I'd rather stay in the county. I don't want to be in Phoenix. Where do I sign?"
Through STEP committee actions, initiatives of the talented city staff, results of the 1991 Scottsdale Visioning Program, and other thoughtful means, Scottsdale earned a national reputation as a premier municipality. What other city would come up with a robotic garbage truck nicknamed Godzilla, or dare to ban billboards so that our scenic beauty would not be blocked, or get a near-perfect approval rating from citizens for its public libraries, or have voters overwhelmingly approve a sales tax increase in order to buy thousands of acres for the McDowell-Sonoran Preserve? While citizens and their city government were creating municipal facilities and amenities, other institutions and organizations were challenged to create programs and events to enhance our quality of life and build a community we are all proud of. Theirs has been the challenge of keeping an increasingly diverse community, one with a small-town friendliness and level of commitment. One of Scottsdale's oldest institutions, and one charged with the vital responsibility of educating our youth, is the Scottsdale Unified School District. Created in 1896 by Winfield Scott, Frank Titus and John Tate, and led by a host of dedicated school boards ever since, the Scottsdale School District, along with the Paradise Valley District, has grown from a hastily constructed one-room wooden building to a network of over 40 schools with consistently high academic achievements. In 1970, Scottsdale Community College opened the doors to its main campus. In 1999, it expanded with a campus in the Scottsdale Air Park. Since then, other institutes of higher learning have opened in Scottsdale, including the Scottsdale Culinary Institute, Scottsdale Artist School, and branches of several national universities. And who can forget that Frank Lloyd Wright established his School of Architecture at Taliesin West in 1937. Whenever a need in Scottsdale was identified, there was a group to help take care of it. Citizens organized community chest drives, raised money for an iron lung during the polio epidemic in the late 1940s and early 1950s, formed the Boys Club about the time of incorporation, donated blood for local youth serving in the Korea and Vietnam Wars. The JCs formed in 1953, took over the Sunshine Festival and renamed it the Parada del Sol, and continue to provide volunteer leadership for this parade of all parades and its rodeo weekend. After the Scottsdale Baseball Club built a stadium in 1955 and attracted the Baltimore Orioles to play there, the Scottsdale Charros formed in 1961 and took over as spring training hosts. Scottsdale leadership formed in 1986 to groom residents to lead community organizations. Countless other groups contribute to Scottsdale's quality of life. Chaplain Scott would no doubt be pleased to see that churches have continued to flourish in the town he founded 113 years ago. Scottsdale's communities of faith have implemented many programs for youth and seniors over the years and have generously donated food, clothing, and other necessities to Vista del Camino, homeless shelters, and international relief efforts. One would also hope he would be pleased to see that we continue to respect the blend of cultures that make up our community, just as he did when he asked the chief of the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community for permission to establish his homestead in 1888. Together, our community has celebrated our cultural heritage through the Yaqui Mural Project, orchestrated by local artist Mario Martinez, the Ballet Folklorico, performed by the Paiute Center's International Club, the Martin Luther King Jr. Dinner held each January, and many other events.
Jesus Corral was one of the lead members of the Mexican community, the barrio, which used to be where the Scottsdale Mall is now. We had a very charming Mexican community. And the outdoor Los Olivos, which was outdoor at that time, Jesus Corral designed and made all of the artistic things that were there, and I believe that he organized the Miracle of the Roses, which was a celebration of on December 12th, of the Miracle of the Roses, the Virgin of Guadalupe, the main Mexican icon, so to speak. And I was on the committee to decorate for that down Brown Avenue, and we had no budget. So we used the Hosanna palm fronds from the nurseries from the palm trees, and then tumbleweeds, which we sprayed red. And we did get around to buying some bows. And that was quite a budget breaker for decorating the whole city, which was all of 4 blocks. But it was a candlelight parade with the Virgin of Guadalupe, and there were mink coats next to overalls and jeans in that procession, and it's a pity they don't do it anymore.
One of the most interesting challenges our community has faced in the past 50 years is sustaining our stature as a hub for artists, art, crafts, and culture. The city's arts heritage dates back to Winfield Scott days, when artists were welcomed into the community. George Ellis and his family encouraged artists to settle in the area they built north of Scottsdale in the 1930s, an area now known as Cattle Track. After World War II, artists and craftspeople like Wes Segner, Lloyd Kiva, Lou Davis, and Matilde Schaefer moved into the Arizona Craftsman Center, formerly Brown's General Store, and created one-of-a-kind designs to the delight of winter visitors. During the 1950s and 60s, an offshoot of the arts and crafts business in Scottsdale was the development of a trendy fashion industry. Western-inspired couture shops opened throughout downtown Scottsdale and gained fame in national magazines like Life and Harper's Bazaar. In fact, in 1951, Harper's sent its top models from New York to premiere the new Sunset Pinks fashion line at a show attended by thousands. Local sponsors, Coldwater's department store, and the Scottsdale Chamber of Commerce set up a 500-foot runway down Main Street. Even the Camelback Inn's mascot mule Snowball participated. Buck Saunders opened his Trading Post Gallery on Brown Avenue in 1949. Dozens of galleries followed his lead and located in downtown Scottsdale. There were enough galleries in 1973 to start a weekly art walk. Today, there are over 100 galleries throughout the city. Thanks to artists, arts patrons, and visionaries like Cax Herberger, Phil Curtis, Carolyn Allen, Bob Carrots, Sam Campana, Ellie Ziegler, and many others, Scottsdale began a public art collection in 1972, built a Center for the Arts in 1975, and opened a Museum of Contemporary Art in 1999. Louise Lincoln Kerr designed a small performing arts center adjacent to her home in 1958 and turned it over to ASU in 1981. Irv Fleming started the Scottsdale Symphony in 1974, now housed in the historic Old Mission Church. Complementing these arts facilities and organizations, the community built a year-round calendar of art events and festivals. Perhaps one of the biggest challenges Scottsdale has faced and continues to face is keeping its individual character, local control, and most livable city status while participating in regional programs. Scottsdale has enjoyed close ties with its neighboring communities, and its residents rely on important regional assets. Canals and dams were some of the first regional assets that Scottsdale residents shared with their neighbors. Means of transportation have also been important shared assets, particularly when the Southern Pacific Railroad opened branch line service into Phoenix in 1887 and mainline service in 1926. Rail service paved the way for many of Scottsdale's settlers to arrive in the valley. Although Sky Harbor Airport actually opened on Labor Day in 1929, Scottsdale didn't really begin to reap the benefits of new access for tourists until after World War II, when air travel became popular. Regional planners were talking interstate freeway system during the Eisenhower years, when plans called for an east-west freeway to cut through the southern part of our city near Los Arcos. Scottsdale balked. Finally, at the turn of the 21st century, Scottsdale and the valley are linked by a freeway system. But we still face the challenges of congestion on our surface streets and declining air quality due to car traffic. One of the most important challenges we face today is how to preserve what we have while still moving forward. Scottsdale is blessed with breathtaking mountain and desert scenery and a captivating Western heritage that piques the curiosity of people around the nation and the world. How do we balance preservation of what we have while we inevitably incorporate new ideas, new technology, and new opportunities? We have citizen-driven organizations such as the Scottsdale Historical Society and the McDowell-Sonoran Land Trust to help raise our consciousness about what is important to preserve. And we have the wisdom of longtime Scottsdalians to blend with the fresh approaches of our newcomers. Today, 50 years after incorporating as a town of 2,000 residents, Scottsdale is a major city with a population nearing 220,000. We have paved roads, but they're crowded. We have a strong and diverse economy, but will it sustain itself? We have citizens who participate in their government and civic organizations, but will future generations? Whatever our challenges are, or may be, one thing is certain: Scottsdale has a lot to be proud of. We have a rich heritage and a promising future. The people of Scottsdale have created a very special place.
I am overwhelmed to see what the generations of Scottsdale residents have accomplished since I left this earth. My hat is off to you. My dreams are being faithfully fulfilled. In closing, I would like to share with you a letter I wrote when I knew my judgment day was at hand in 1910. My dear neighbors and friends, I leave to you my work in Scottsdale. I had planned to do much this winter with you, but God has called me. If you take this work and do it, and enlarge it as God gives you strength, you will receive my blessings and his. Good night, and Godspeed.